He has been called country music's nicest man, a gentle soul with a velvet voice and a guitar in his hands. At 68, he still walks with the grace of a poet, the kind of artist people thought could never hold a grudge. But behind the polite smiles and decades of applause, there was another side of him. A critic who watched his beloved genre change before his eyes. A perfectionist who kept silent while others took shortcuts. For years he bit his tongue, clapped politely, and stayed out of the spotlight of controversy. But the truth is, he never forgot, and he never forgave. And now his silence has broken, revealing the names of 7 artists who, in his eyes, betrayed what music was supposed to be. Kanye West. The first name on Vince Gill's unspoken list didn't even come from country music. Kanye West, a global superstar whose influence reached far beyond rap, symbolized everything Vince believed was destroying artistry in modern times. Their worlds could not have been more different, but in Vince's mind, Kanye became the clearest example of how music had shifted from a craft to a spectacle. In 2016, Vince sat for an interview where he lamented the arrogance of younger artists. "They walk into a room and expect the world to bow," he said. He didn't mention anyone directly, but the industry connected the dots immediately. That very same month, Kanye had declared himself the greatest artist of all time in one of his most infamous rants. To fans, the overlap was no coincidence. Vince had chosen his words carefully, but those who knew him understood exactly who he meant. For Vince, music was supposed to be about humility, discipline, and service to something larger than the individual. He spent decades refining his voice, mastering his guitar, and writing songs that put stories before stardom. Kanye, in Vince's eyes, embodied the opposite. He thrived on chaos, built a brand on ego, and turned his career into a monument of self-worship. Gill had watched as headlines shifted away from songs and toward scandals. He had seen artists rewarded not for what they created, but for how loudly they demanded attention. Kanye wasn't just another musician to Vince. He was a warning sign of what music across all genres was becoming. Award shows became less about the music and more about the drama. Vince saw Kanye interrupt colleagues on stage, dominate news cycles with outbursts, and turn albums into platforms for self-promotion. For Gill, who had always believed the song should shine brighter than the singer, it was unbearable. The idea that an artist could hijack the stage, disrespect peers, and still be celebrated left him disillusioned. And yet, Vince never spoke Kanye's name, never engaged directly, and never needed to. Their paths never crossed, because it wasn't about hip-hop versus country. It was about values. Vince represented restraint, humility, and devotion to craft. Kanye built empires on excess, ego, and spectacle. The clash between them was symbolic, not personal. By refusing to acknowledge him, Vince made his position clear. His silence was louder than any insult. It told the world exactly which side of music he stood on and what kind of future he feared for it. Garth Brooks. If Kanye symbolized the dangers of ego on a global scale, Garth Brooks was the thorn in Vince Gill's side much closer to home. The two men both defined country music in the 1990s, but in very different ways. Vince was the craftsman, the quiet poet with a guitar, the kind of artist who could stand on stage with nothing but a song and silence a room. Garth was the showman, the man who strapped on a headset microphone, filled stadiums with fireworks, and turned country concerts into rock spectacles. For fans, both approaches had their place, but for Vince, it felt like something sacred was being trampled on. Country, in his mind, was about storytelling, nuance, and roots. Watching Garth transform the genre into arena-driven entertainment felt like a betrayal. In a 2005 interview, Vince spoke about how real country was losing ground to what he called performance-driven acts. He never named Garth, but when he joked at a CMA event that country music wasn't Broadway with boots, everyone understood who he meant. The divide wasn't just about style, It was philosophical. Garth valued scale, movement, and spectacle, while Vince valued melody, truth, and restraint. The contrast was so stark that even at industry events, the two rarely appeared side by side. At a 2010 tribute concert, Vince was scheduled to perform but pulled out at the last minute, an absence that fueled speculation that he refused to share a stage where Garth was in the audience. Their paths never converged musically. Vince collaborated with legends like Dolly Parton and Carrie Underwood, but Garth's name was always missing. To Vince, it wasn't personal, it was about principle. Garth may have redefined the business, but in Vince's eyes, he represented a commercial revolution that left the soul of country behind. Shania Twain. Shania Twain was the face of a new era in country music, glamorous, polished, and unstoppable. Her albums like Come On Over became some of the best-selling in the genre's history, blending pop hooks with country themes and reaching audiences around the world. She opened doors for women, proved they could headline stadium tours, and broke barriers that had held back female performers for decades. To millions, she was a hero. But to Vince Gill, her rise marked the beginning of a painful shift. Vince had built his reputation on raw honesty, ballads steeped in emotion, and songs that spoke of life's struggles without glitter or gloss. Shania, with her sparkling production and crossover pop appeal, represented the opposite. He never attacked her in interviews, but his silence was deafening. Unlike other legends, Vince and Shania never collaborated, never shared a tribute, and rarely even acknowledged one another at industry events. For two stars who stood at the top of the same genre, that distance was impossible to ignore. Insiders whispered that Vince saw her as the tipping point. When Nashville started chasing trends rather than talent, and when country music began sounding like anything but country, he once remarked that, "We lost a generation of real country fans chasing radio hits." Though he didn't use her name, few doubted who he was referring to. To Vince, Shania's dazzling success wasn't simply a personal triumph, it was a sign that the genre's roots were slipping away. The two paths never crossed, and that absence became its own story. Shania brought millions of new listeners, but Vince could never bring himself to celebrate her records. For him, she was the moment country music sold its soul to the mainstream, and his silence was his loudest protest. Billy Ray Cyrus. In 1992, Billy Ray Cyrus became a household name overnight with Achy Breaky Heart. The song swept across the country like wildfire, sparking a line-dancing craze and pushing country music further into the pop culture spotlight than ever before. For many, it was fun, catchy, and unforgettable. But for Vince Gill, it was everything wrong with where the genre was headed. Behind closed doors, Vince reportedly joked that the song set country music back 10 years. In one CMA green room, he was overheard calling it karaoke with a mullet, a remark that traveled quickly among Nashville insiders. To him, the song wasn't country at all. It was a gimmick, a novelty act that prioritized a one-line hook and flashy image over musicianship and storytelling. Billy Ray leaned into the look, tight jeans, big hair, and a pop country sound designed to sell records. Vince, who built his career on heartfelt ballads and technical mastery, saw it as a parody of everything he valued. The two men never collaborated, never shared a stage, and when they did cross paths at award shows, their exchanges were reportedly cold and distant. It wasn't just about the song, it was about what it unleashed. Vince feared that the success of Achy Breaky Heart would inspire a wave of artists more focused on image and marketing than substance. And in many ways, he was right. By the late 1990s, a new crop of acts emerged, blurring the lines between country and pop with simple hooks and radio-friendly beats. For Vince, Billy Ray became the symbol of that decline. Even as Billy Ray's career faded and his daughter Miley Cyrus rose to global fame, Vince never softened his stance. He didn't hate the man, but he couldn't stand what he represented, the moment country music began trading its heart for headlines. Jason Aldean. By the mid-2000s, country music had a new face, Jason Aldean. Baseball caps, roaring guitars, lyrics about tailgates, whiskey, and dirt roads. He embodied what came to be known as bro country. His songs were loud, simple, and wildly popular, especially with younger audiences who wanted music for parties rather than reflection. His concerts sold out, his albums topped charts, and his image became a brand. But for Vince Gill, Aldean's rise wasn't a triumph. It was another nail in the coffin of the genre he loved. Vince had always spoken of country music as an art form, a place where stories lived. To him, lyrics were supposed to carry honesty, pain, and humanity. Watching Aldean dominate the airwaves with what he saw as shallow themes was disheartening. In a 2014 interview with Rolling Stone, Vince commented, "I think we've dumbed it down. There's room for fun in music, but let's not pretend it's country just because there's a pickup truck in the video." The remark didn't mention Aldean by name, but no one doubted who he was talking about. Insiders say Vince quietly refused invitations to present awards or attend events where Aldean was the featured headliner. It wasn't ego, it was principle. Vince simply couldn't bring himself to publicly endorse music he felt betrayed the tradition of songwriting. That silent boycott spoke volumes. What made the divide even starker was how fans responded. Aldean's supporters loved his party anthems, while Vince's fans remained loyal to heartfelt ballads and craft. The two worlds rarely overlapped, and when they did, it only highlighted how different their values were. Vince didn't see Aldean as an enemy, but as a symbol of how easily Nashville could trade storytelling for spectacle. To him, bro country wasn't just a trend. It was proof that the genre was slipping further away from its roots, Kris Kristofferson. For decades, Vince Gill publicly praised the legends of country music, men and women whose names were etched into the foundation of the genre. But there was one name he could never quite bring himself to embrace: Kris Kristofferson. To the public, Kristofferson was a poet of the outlaw movement, a man whose raw lyrics and ragged performances captured something authentic and rebellious. To Vince, however, that very messiness was the problem. Gill had built his career on precision. He valued technical skill, lyrical structure, and the kind of vocal control that came only from relentless discipline. Kristofferson, by contrast, was celebrated for breaking rules, for singing like he was barely holding it together, and for delivering songs that critics called gritty and real. To Vince, it felt like the industry had lowered the bar. One friend once recalled Vince saying, "It's not deep, it's just sloppy. We lowered the bar and called it genius." The tension was never loud or public, but it was real. At award shows and industry events, Vince kept a polite distance. Stories circulated of him skipping out on rehearsals when Kristofferson was performing, muttering that he didn't want to watch another train wreck on stage. Whether true or not, the tales reflected how Nashville insiders saw their relationship, polite on the surface, but fractured underneath. What frustrated Vince most wasn't Kristofferson's success, but the way critics romanticized it. He saw countless hard-working musicians, artists who practiced relentlessly, overlooked while Kristofferson's rough edges were praised as authenticity. To Gill, artistry meant mastering your craft, not stumbling through it. And yet Kristofferson was rewarded for exactly that. No duets, no tributes, no collaborations ever came between them. Their silence told the story. For Vince, Kristofferson was a symbol of chaos in a genre he believed required order. And while fans saw genius in the outlaw poet, Vince only saw the damage of celebrating imperfection. Travis Tritt. Of all the rivalries that lingered quietly around Vince Gill, none carried the same edge as his uneasy history with Travis Tritt. Both men rose to fame in the 1990s, but they came from entirely different worlds. Vince was polished, traditional, and technical. Travis embodied the outlaw spirit, rough, rowdy, unpredictable. Their fans rarely overlapped, their styles never blended, and their personalities were destined to clash. The tension came to a head at a benefit concert in 1997. Backstage, Vince reportedly made an offhand remark about artists who play outlaw but can't write a verse. Word reached Travis quickly, and he confronted Vince face to face. It didn't come to blows, but witnesses recalled a stare so cold it silenced the room. From that moment on, the divide between them was clear. In country music, this one was never addressed publicly. No interviews, no reconciliation, no staged handshakes for the cameras. The silence between them became its own story. Vince's fans admired his grace and honesty, while Travis's audience celebrated his rebellious energy. Both men carried on, but the air between them never thawed. Their clash symbolized a larger battle in the 90s country, tradition versus rebellion. Vince stood for craftsmanship, discipline, and respect for the genre's roots. Travis embodied a wilder freedom, a spirit that drew younger fans but left purists shaking their heads. Neither man gave ground, and the divide never healed. In the end, their rivalry wasn't just about music. It was about two visions of what country should be, colliding without compromise. For decades, Vince Gill kept his criticisms to himself, smiling on stage while silently drawing lines behind the curtain. But at 68, the truth is clear. Even the nicest man in country music had his breaking points. From outlaw poets to pop queens, from bro country stars to stadium kings, each name revealed a wound he could never ignore. What do you think? Was Vince Gill defending the soul of country music, or was he too harsh on artists who simply found success their own way? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more untold stories from the world of music.